Okay. Do I show up anywhere yet? I don't see my me. No! Oh, okay. That's one. Where's my other one? Oh, okay, good. Whoops. Sorry I'm a little delayed today, people. You know what it's like when things take longer than you expect them to take? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. There we go. Okay. Alright. Now I'm organized. For varying definitions of organized. Barely organized. But we'll go with that. Anyway, hi. How you guys doing tonight? So, as I mentioned in at least the title, there we go, the title for these streams, videos, whatever. This is the first time that we saw the storm mechanic. I'm just gonna fast forward real quickly. Wait, what? Okay, yes. Astro Steed, or Astro Steel rather, for example. What was the other one? Wing Shards. Oh yeah, Wing Shards, right beside it. There's some interesting cards in the set. There's always interesting cards in the set. But you gotta be I mean, obviously you gotta be a little finicky on what ones you're looking at. But yeah. Let's start taking a look at what we got in white. Actually, before I get too far ahead, if you're paying any attention to the social media platforms where I'm posting this stuff, so Blue Sky, Twitter/X, which I don't expect to see a lot of people following me on that because of all the headaches there have been from that as of late. My Discord, you know, anything along that line. You got put in upside down. I apologize. I just got 3 cards in the mail today from face-to-face games that I'm kind of happy about. One of them is really hard to pin down. None of the shops in my area have got this card. Scepter of Eternal Glory. Let me just pull it up real quick. No, RE. Four mana legendary artifact. Taps for any color. Or if you've got 3 or more lands with the same name, it taps for 3 mana of any color. Well, when you start taking a look at some of the decks that I've been building. Beep. Excuse you. Beep. Oh. Helps if I use the right card. Or the card. Wow. The right button. Yeah. Let's say, I don't know, let's go to my 5-color deck. Without going too deep into it, I'm just going to fast forward down to where the lands are. There's 38 lands in this deck. Right down at the bottom, you find my basic lands. Okay. 10 forest, 4 plains, 2 swamp, 2 island, 2 mountain. 10 plus 4 is 14. Plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, 16, 18, 20. I'm trying to run about 20 basic lands per card, or per deck. I get fairly close for some of them. My mono blue commons only deck, and there's enough like it runs actually 20 islands. There's enough non-basics that are interesting enough to play. This particular list runs, by the looks of things, 33 lands, which doesn't sound like a lot, but again, the entire premise of this particular deck is every card that you're looking at is drawing more cards. You know, stuff that when it comes into play draws cards, stuff that when it dies draws cards, or maybe you draw or discard a card. There's a handful that don't, like One with the Wind, but this entire category here is there to pump my creatures first and foremost. However, if I can find a version that, like for example, Rousing Greed, that draws cards, I will play it. Most of my removal, including Relic of Progenitus, to some extent, draws cards. 5 cards that trigger on me drawing cards. Bulk draw is there more to draw more than just 1 or 2 cards? Third Path Invoker and Third Path Savant and Timorous Invoker. I'm going to spend 7 or 8 mana, because at some point later in the game, you're going to start ending up with a bunch of excess mana. Suddenly it's like, hey, by the way, I'm going to draw more cards. I've got like 7 counter spells in here. Each of them draw me cards. My mana rocks. Arcane Signet is just, taps for blue. Bonder's Ornament draws cards. Commander Sphere, sack to draw a card. Firestone just produces mana. Lever Acceptance, sack to draw a card. Mindstone, sack to draw a card. Oreska Relic, sack to draw a card. 7 of my lands do something about drawing cards. They either have cycling, or they put cards back on top of my deck for my graveyard so I can replay them. Something involving playing with more cards. So this deck actually only runs like 33 land compared to the 38 that I normally go with, because it can draw so many cards. You hit 2 lands, you're okay. You hit 3 lands, you're doing well. So, but if I'm especially looking at like a monocolored or a 2-colored deck, Scepter of Eternal Glory ends up being a cheaper Gilded Lotus really fast. But then you gotta start looking at what kind of decks that you're playing with that actually want Gilded Lotus, because not all decks do, and this is something a lot of people gotta remember. I cannot remember the specifics, but I remember many years ago, I came up with a deck idea for Vintage, where the deck really didn't care whether or not it had Black Lotus. It really wasn't interested in it. Black Lotus, for those that don't know, most expensive card in the game. Most expensive mass-produced card in the game. We won't talk about the One Ring in this context. the bait, because the standard printing for the One Ring is only like, what? You can get it for as little as like 55 US. 55 US for that one, 75 US basically for that one. There's 3 different styles that you're getting for under $100. It's only when you're starting to get fancy they start costing more. And then the one version that's like millions of dollars because Post Malone bought it for millions of dollars. And it already started being high. And it just kept going up and up and up. But Black Lotus, barring weird shenanigans like that, because like I said, base price is under $100, is the most expensive card in the game. Most expensive mass-produced card in the game. And it's easily tens of thousands of dollars. And it's literally a 0 mana artifact that you sack it. I don't even remember if it requires to be tapped. I don't think it does. I think it's just sacrifice. Yeah, the most recent, tap and sack. Okay, the most recent pricing that that Scryfall has, which probably means TCG player has, that is legit, is roughly for the most recent printing. The most recent real printing is like 14,000 euros. So, like somewhere around 20 grand US or something like that. And so, yeah, it's literally just 0 mana artifact, tap and sack it, get 3 mana of any color. It's a one shot, but it gets you like triple blue or triple green or triple red or whatever. It's it's part of where Gilded Lotus came from. Gilded Lotus costs 5 instead of 0, but you just tap it, you don't sack it, and the ability is the same. Anyway, Scepter of Eternal Glory is not actually that hard. Good lord, you're cheap nowadays. What? And yet I cannot find anywhere that has these. um, but if you're running, first of all, you have to run enough basic land. Because realistically, there's no other lands. I don't think there's any other lands in Commander that you can run any number of copy of that are not basic lands. And to be fair, we now have 12 basic lands that follow that line. Mountain, plain, silent, swamp, forest, wastes, and snow-covered versions of all of those. Everything else, you're one of. So you have to run enough basic lands. And you have to not run enough that this is going to kick in. I would assume if about half of your lands, or at least half of your stable lands, and I'll explain that line in a moment, are basic lands, and you're running two colors or less, you're probably fine. Now, for those that haven't encountered this, me saying this before, what do I mean by stable lands? I put you. Give me a moment. Oh, so I'm about to sneeze. And of course, my body decides not to sneeze. Um, let's see if that worked. Hello? There we go. So, Island comes into play, stays in play until something happens to it. Okay? Strip Mine. Counter example. Comes into play, taps for mana, or tap and sack it to blow something up. Not what I consider a stable land, because this is a card that's going to get it's going to get sacrificed fairly easily. Lands that fetch other lands, typically also not stable. You sacrifice them pretty much right away. Escape Tunnel, good example. Comes into play, you don't keep it around. You might keep it around because you want to use it to make something unblockable. But realistically, most people are just going to sacrifice it pretty much right away to find a basic land. Cards like this, I do not consider stable because they, once they're in play, they disappear fairly quickly. You're not going to be able to rely on them turn after turn after turn. You could also make an argument for cards like Peat Bog and that cycle. The depletion lands that, once there's no counters on it, you sacrifice them. Partly depends on how the deck is built, but a lot of decks just run them as is, which is perfectly fine. But they run them as is, and as a result, after a couple of uses, they're gone. What's another good example? Tranquil Thicket. The lands that have got cycling. I'm more likely to consider these stable because you're going to play them as a land early on. Once they are in play, they're going to stay in play unless they get removed somehow. You want to remove them yourself by playing some kind of bounce land. Let's say, let's say a card like Dimir Aqueduct. When it enters, return the land you control to its owner's hand. You return the Tranquil Thicket back to your hand, at which point then you can cycle it to draw a card. But barring that, you're doing this, it's going to be, like a card like that is going to be, in my opinion, those are stable. Dimir Aqueduct, again, stays in play unless something happens to it, unless somebody uses Strip Mine or a similar effect or whatever. Casualties aware, who knows. Tranquil Thicket, you're probably okay considering it stable. Peat Bog, unless you specifically build around proliferate and whatever, and have enough lower cost stuff that you can actually, if Peat Bog comes out relatively early, you can keep it around. I would not consider this stable. I would not consider Escape Tunnel stable in most decks. I would not consider Strip Mine stable because it gets sacrificed pretty much right away. Because, it might stay around for like 3 or 4 turns. And then it's going to get blown up. Somebody's going to see a threat that they have to deal with it, and they're like, get rid of it. But basic lands are your hallmark for stable lands. They come into play. They stay in play unless somebody does something about them. Also, I specifically bring this printing up. I am personally looking for more copies of this specific printing of Island. Invasion number 338. To put in my to quote somebody from one of my LGSs, in my mono blue deck that identifies as green. Anyway, all that being said, if you have out of those 38, 44, however many you run, first of all, you need to make sure you have enough stable lands. Just running 20 is not going to cut it. Well, what do I mean by just running 20? You know what? Let's go to my colorless control deck for a moment. So I'm going to ignore all these guys right now. You're a land, but you're basically a spell. You don't have a mana ability. Okay, my lands. I have 6 that are here to blow up a thing. 4 are here primarily to blow up lands. 1 is there to blow up, to hit a random, like, non-flying creature. And 1 is there to blow up, pop goes the world. I have 6 lands that are here to produce extra mana. Or, sorry, 9 lands that are here to produce extra mana. This one's going to be fun to pin down. I have 9 lands that are there for other interesting things. Proliferate, gaining life, casting spells with flash, tutoring, copying stuff. Making treasures, whatever. But here's the thing. Like, the ones under explosions, these 6, are all going to get blown up fairly quickly and easily. These extra mana, Crystal Vein, I don't consider exactly stable. It'll be fine, but as soon as I need a boost of an additional mana, I'm sacrificing it for an extra colored mana. Or an extra colorless mana. Emergence Zone gets sacrificed for its ability. Inventor's Fair gets sacrificed to tutor. Mirror Pool gets sacrificed to copy stuff. Endless Sands gets sacrificed to bring stuff back. Command Beacon gets sacrificed to bring your commander back. Treasure Vault gets sacrificed to make treasure tokens. Myriad Landscape gets sacrificed to search up basics. So that's like out of my. So sure, 20, 29, 38. I'm running 44 lands. But around 8 or 9 of them I do not consider stable. That leaves me about 36 lands that I do consider stable, which I'm okay with that. This is part of the reason why I'm running more lands, because some of these are gonna get blown up. My strip mine effects are gonna get blown up pretty much right away. you know. And a lot of the ones under my other effects, Myriad Landscape is going to get blown up fairly quickly. I just realized that share a land type. Wastes does not have a type. I cannot run Myriad Landscape appropriately in this deck. Myriad Landscape actually has to come out because Wastes does not have a type. It's a name, it's basic land, but they're looking to share a land type. They're looking to share forest or island or whatever. Okay, this is getting cut out. I'm probably adding Archway Commons instead, which is fine. I have use for that elsewhere. Anyway, back to the Scepter. If you're running enough stable, this is what I say, if you run enough stable lands and you run enough basics, Scepter of Eternal Glory is going to be fine. Long-winded way to get back to the Scepter discussion. It's going to be fine. The other cards that I got, I got Priest of Titania because she's only a common, but she's not exactly easy to pin down. I mean, yeah, so here's the thing. When I say she's not easy to pin down, I'm talking about going, like, actually going to, I have 4 local game stores and, within a 10-minute walk diameter. So, like, half a kilometer radius. Or, like, a third of a mile. Cards like that sell out easily. They're commons. Uncommon in Modern Horizons 3, I think it was. But common elsewhere. And people want them for multiple decks and don't want to trade them in. They snap up easy. So I had stored credit with face-to-face games. And I got my Scepter. And I got the Priest. And those are both for the same deck. They're both going into Lathril Elves, although I'm not sure I need Scepter of Eternal Glory for that deck, because that deck is going to produce a fair amount of mana, but I'll see what happens. And then Hissing Quagmire, which is a black-green land, because my deck is black-green, that can become a creature with Death Touch till end of turn. Pay a cost. Make it a 2/3? Sorry, 2/2 Death Toucher till end of turn. Okay. Hey, it's a land that can kill a creature. What? Yeah. Anyway. That finally came in today. I was hoping, not expecting, but hoping they would have come in late last week. They didn't come in late last week. Today's Wednesday. They came in today. Yay. The order got out went out about a week ago. They're in. So that's cards for last rolls that I can knock off my list now. Scourge. Let's start with Scourge. Let's start with white. Card number 1, Exile Doomslayer or Doomsayer. Exile Doomsayer says all morph costs cost 2 more. So it's not bringing the thing into play face down. Or that's not casting the thing face down. Because you are casting a creature spell when you cast with morph. It's turning it face up. Part of the problem why this is so low on the list of playables is there are easier and better ways to flip stuff face up. Again, one of my favorite combinations. Oh. Is this. You cast the Chroma Angel Fury face down. You cast that Chroma Angel Fury face down as a morph. Because she has morph for 3 red plus 3. You're not going to play 3 red plus 3. This is modern legal, incidentally, as well. Cast her face down as a 2/2. On your, on turn 4 then, or turn 3 if you've got some kind of accelerant. You cast Restoration Angel. When she enters, you may exile target non-angel creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. When something is face down, like you have a morph or something that's been manifested or cloaked or whatever, it's going to be a 2/2 with no abilities. Maybe it's got ward because of the newer versions, whatever. No name, no relevant here, no creature type. That means the Chroma Angel Fury, when she's face down, has no creature type, which means when she's face down, she is not an angel. Restoration Angel takes a look at that and goes, oh, cool. That's a random creature. Doesn't look like an angel to me. Exile it, bring it back. Oh, you were an angel. Yeah, hi. You don't look like an angel. Sorry. Should we go beat face together? Yeah, let's do it. Slightly surprised that a Chroma Angel of Fury doesn't have haste. But she can't be countered, so that's fine. So turn 4, you suddenly have 9 power worth of Angel on the board. This is a method I like. But morph 3 red plus 3. If you were to actually morph her, you need 6 mana. With Exile Doomsayer out, you need 8, which is basically what she costs to cast natively. But you get an effect like Restoration Angel. Ephemerate is a commonly played card in a lot of decks and a lot of formats. That, Philia, Eldrazi Displacer, Ghostly Flicker, anything of that nature at all. Blur. Exile a creature, and then bring it back. There are cards that literally just say turn target creature face up, turn target face down card face up. There's a bunch of cards, there's a bunch of ways of just getting it into play face up anyway. And so bypassing having to pay the morph cost is not hard. Which is part of the reason why Exile Doomsayer is so low on the list. People don't play this because because the problem is this only affects morph. This also pardon me. This only affects morph. So technically morph and megamorph also count, because megamorph is specifically a variant of morph. Like, they literally say this is morph, except in addition this. But otherwise it's treated as morph. Manifest is handled separately. It's similar, but it's handled separately. Same with Manifest Dread and Cloaking and all that other jazz. They're related, but it's like it's kind of like one's your brother, and then like the others are like, cousins or nephews or whatever. Yeah. Anyway. So the first problem that Exile Doomsayer has to deal with is it doesn't have anything to do with the other mechanics. The second problem, which is the one that has existed longer and has existed at least since Morph has existed. Sorry, longer than the second one is a problem that existed by the time Morph came out. Is there are ways to turn it face up without having to use the morph ability. and the way I like to, because some people get confused on this. Restoration Angel specifically says the card gets exiled and then returns to the battlefield. Morph does not have the creature leave the battlefield. The way I word it is it just changes form. It's like, it's like if you have Hulk, the big green the big green smashy Avenger, out of Marvel. And he doesn't, going from Bruce Banner to the Hulk or vice versa, he doesn't leave the battlefield. He just changes form. He can be, there's that one scene in, I think it's Avengers, where he's literally running and he starts off as Bruce Banner and just runs and changes into the Hulk in the process. good example of what happens with effects like Morph. Still on the battlefield, just changing in a different form. Superman out of DC has a habit of disappearing, especially if there's other people around, because he wants to maintain his secret identity. I don't think Banner cares nearly so much. Disappears, changes his form, and then comes back. That's what Restoration Angel does. That's why there's a break in between, and you have to worry about summoning sickness, whereas, if it's already on the battlefield and it's already been around since the beginning of your most recent turn, you don't have to worry about, or you have something that grants haste, you don't have to worry about summoning sickness. You can just do whatever with it. Anyway, so yeah, Exile Doomsayer, not that big a deal. Doesn't affect enough stuff, and even stuff that it does affect is you're going to be paying the morph cost a lot less often than it appears. And this doesn't even count morph costs that don't involve mana. One that's in at least one of my decks is Ruthless Ripper. She's in, I think she's in my Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Which sounds funny to say, but I think she's in my Yu-Gi-Oh deck. It's a commander deck with, some surface similarities to Yu-Gi-Oh. It has a couple of other things in there to be Regekis. It has gods. It has traps. It has stuff. And because she's got Morph, it's got a bunch of cards that can enter the battlefield face down. Usually in face down attack position. However, there are a few cards in there that will make stuff enter the battlefield tapped, i.e. in defense position, so I can have stuff enter in face down defense position. Yeah, I've also got a couple of things there to be something resembling Exodia, fusion / succeed / rituals, etc. So on and so forth. I did, however, fail at putting in there something to be Pot of Greed. That was... I'll figure something for that out later. Anyway, Ruthless Ripper has a morph cost of revealing a black card that's in your hand. That's all it is. Well, okay. If it's just revealing a black card, okay. Well, now you have to pay 2 mana on top of that. Okay, fine, whatever, don't care. So yeah, Exile Doomsayer, it's going to be really hard to find a useful place for that. Trap Digger, da-na-na-na. 4 mana for a 1/3 human soldier. Pay 3 and tap it, put a trap counter on target land you control. And then at some point you can sack a land with a trap counter on it to do 3 damage to an attacking creature that doesn't have flying. If you're willing to sacrifice enough lands, you can blow up a bunch of creatures and a bunch of stuff. Again, I would not be upset to see somebody play. I'd be like, wait, you're doing what? Okay, hold on. Let me catch my breath. So you're sacrificing your land to kill stuff that's attacking. And here's the fun part. Because it involves counters, right? there's going to be ways that you can move those counters around. So maybe you put out a few and then you proliferate and then find a way to shuffle those counters around to other lands instead of having to pay 3 and put it. But yeah, like the basic way of thinking of this is, I pay 3 mana, I put a counter on this land, and then I can sack that land to hit an attacker for 3. Or you can let them build up. And let them build up. And let them build up. I have a question. What does Solemnity say? Oh no! Solemnity absolutely kills some lands. Counters can't be put on ... or lands. If you're doing that, don't play Solemnity in your deck, folks. The trap counters, you'll activate it. It'll be legal target. It'll try to resolve. It'll fail. Put the counter on the land. No proliferation shenanigans. None of that. Anyway. But Trap Digger is going to, I would be entertained, especially since somebody is playing Trap Digger. They're likely going to have a way to recur the land somehow. I would expect that they would have green in their deck, because green has the easiest way to recur your lands and play additional lands. Now, are there other ways to do it? Sure. But my first step, my first thought would be you're playing, at least Lesnia. But there's other ways to do it. There's always other ways to do it. Anyway. Yeah. Like Trap Digger, you could just completely blindside somebody, especially if you're one of these people that goes, oh, okay, I'm putting a trap counter on my land. What? Yeah, I'm putting a trap counter on my land. Okay. Because most people are going to look at that and go, what's the trap counter for? But they're not going to ask. Because there's so many counters in the game. And the funny thing is, most counters don't actually do anything in and of themselves. Charge counters don't do anything in and of themselves. It's just stuff references charge counters. Counters that affect, directly affect a creature's size, +1/+1 counters, for example. Have obviously an immediate, an actual effect themselves. Ability counters, a flying counter, a death touch counter, a indestructible counter, whatever, grant the ability in question. But most counters, a dream counter, a stun counters, I think, no, I think stun counters actually do. I think stun counters in this context would fall under ability counters. They're not, but they would be handled in this context in the same way. But like dream counters or experience counters or, charge counters, as I mentioned before, and like a whole bunch of the counter types that get used. Time counters don't do anything in and of themselves, but other stuff references them. Poison counters are like the other, probably the other major counter type that actually does something in of themselves. But that's because the rules say say they do. Well, to be fair, that would also be true with ability counters and whatnot. Anyway, so trap counters. Trap counters are just a type of counter that in and of themselves don't do anything. You need to find something that interacts with trap counters. Anyway, Trap Digger, I would be entertained, at least in the short term, to see somebody playing this card. This is not, I think this is bad. This is interesting and novel, and I haven't seen that before. Huh. Zealous Inquisitor. If you can generate infinite mana, you can use this to kill people. Now, to be fair, if you can generate infinite mana, you can find ways to kill people anyway. But 3 mana for a 2/2. 1 white and 1 other. Colon. The next 1 damage that would be dealt to Zealous Inquisitor this turn is dealt to target creature instead. Okay, so I've got 6 spare mana, so the next 3 damage that would be dealt to Zealous Inquisitor, I'm going to shunt over there. Why? Well, what's over there? I don't know. Do you want it to be Stuffy Doll? Do you want it to be, Phyrexian Vindicator? Or do you want it to be something else? Oh, I know. You have a Phyrexian Negator in play. Oh no. Oh, shoot your Phyrexian Negator 3 times. Sacrifice 3 permanents, please. Oh. And that's why you don't play Phyrexian Negator in Commander. Too much combat, too much damage-based effect. Yeah, too many damage-based effects to make it worth playing. You want to play it in a format like Vintage, possibly throw it in your sideboard. Because against control matchups against non-red control, let's try this again. Against control matchups that are not using red to deal with creatures, you're going to be fine. Side them in. Have a 3 mana 5/5 beat stick. Yeah. But that's going to just start burninating creatures left, right, and center. It looks at, it attacks, it looks at a blocker, and it goes, cool. That damage is going over here. Oh, you've got Death Touch? Cool. I'm going to send, because the funny thing is, the source of the damage is not changing. So if somebody blocks with like a 3/3 Death Touch, you go, cool, I've got 6 open mana. Ping to that, ping to that, ping to that. Oh, by the way, the source because the damage it doesn't say the damage is being done by the Inquisitor. The next damage that would be dealt to this creature is dealt elsewhere instead. The damage, cool, it's a 3/3 Death Touch. Okay. Damage from a 3/3 Death Touch is going over here. Damage from a 3/3 Death Touch is going over here. Damage from a 3/3 Death Touch is going over here. Ping, ping, ping. Kill those. It's just redirecting the damage. Have fun with that. Recuperate. Don't bother. In In an absolute pinch, you run Recuperate for like a big chunk of damage prevention. Don't use it for the life gain. Unless, maybe, if you're going like mono commons, like a lot of the decks I do, and you're building around life gain, maybe consider Recuperate for getting 6 life, but you should be able to gain 6 life easier than that. Oh yeah. Renewed Faith does it for 1 less mana, and you can cycle it and still gain life. Viridian Harvest, you throw it on an artifact, and when the artifact is put in the graveyard, you gain 6 life. Pulse of Marasa, really strong. 3 mana instant, return target creature or land from a graveyard to its owner's hand. Usually you're bringing it back to your own. Gain 6 life. Nourish, if you just want gain life. 2 green, instant, gain 6 life. Or Fond of Vigor, 2 to cast, 3 mana and sack it, gain 7. If you're looking to gain a bunch of life at once, you have, like, I would play these 4. Maybe not Viridian Harvest, but I would definitely play these 4 before I even considered thinking about Recuperate. If you need something for damage prevention, maybe, but I wouldn't recommend it. Even Farseer. Whenever creatures turn face up, put +1 counter on the Farseer. So it's a 1/1 flyer for 2 mana, with the ability to potentially get really big. You want this in a deck that's going to have stuff that are going to actually get turned face up themselves. That's going to be the bigger problem. You need the creatures, you need your stuff to be able to get turned face up themselves. I would not rely, because realistically, in a 4-player game, I would probably expect one person to have some cards that turn face up, but I would also expect that they'd either, they would probably have other ways to get them turned face up instead of, again, the same problem as the Exile Doomsayer. They're not going to get turned face up, they're going to get flickered or whatever instead. So if you're playing this card, you're playing this because you have stuff in your own deck that you're turning face up, and you plan on running effects that say turn this card face up, whether that's using the morph mechanic, morph manifest, anything of that nature, or effects that simply say, turn a card face up. Also, keep in mind, it says permanent, so it has to be something that's in play. If it's not something that's on the battlefield, even if you've got a way to turn it face up, it's not a permanent. And originally said creature. They changed the wording from creature to permanent because I think it was Time Spiral Block gave us our first non-creatures that could be turned face up. Zoetic Caverns and Lumen Threadfield come to mind. Wet Wheel, I think, as well. There were like 3 or 4 of them, I think, at least. But there was more than 2. And so every so often you'll come across something that can be turned face up, but it's not a creature. But when it's face down, it's a creature. So that's the reason for the wording change. Um, but yeah, if you're playing Aven Farseer, play it because your own deck has stuff that you want to turn face up. Chrono Zealot. that that same thing that we mentioned about Zealous Inquisitor. So this is a 5 mana 2/5 with a morph of 5 mana, just a slightly more difficult 5 mana. 1 white plus 4 to cast, 2 white plus 3 to turn it face up. Slightly harder. Not enough to make a difference at that point. But when it's turned face up, all damage should be dealt to it this turn, so to the Zealot, is dealt to target creature instead. So, what you can do is, I don't know, I'm going to go back to just for... Oh, that's funny. This is a triggered ability. Emrakul the Eon's Torn... Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about Rule 0 for a moment, because in this case it's actually relevant. I'm not going to go deep down the rabbit hole. We hope. Rule 0 basically says if you want to do something, that might be... Rule 0 is basically, if you want to do something unusual, talk to your group. And if they say cool, go for it. Let's say... Okay, so there's the quote-unquote official ban list for Commander. And I put, official in quotation marks because Commander is, well, up until last year, it's a player-run format. It's a casual format. It's something that, while Wizards of the Coast produce products for it, they support it, but everything was handled by a different group, an external group. The ban list, as a result, is more a matter of these are cards that we recommend that you don't play if you want to have a good experience. However, if your group wants to do something different, go right ahead. If you want to do something different, discuss it with your group, and if they say okay, go for it. That's always been the premise for things like the ban list and why the rules are, for Commander specifically, are the way they are, and so forth and so on. So, what this means is if your group says it's okay, you can play with Sylvan Primordial and Sway of the Stars and whatchamacallit, Emrakul the Eon's Torn, and if you can afford it, Ancestral Recall and Black Lotus and all that jazz. Go ahead. If your group says it's okay, it's okay. That is the primary thing. That is the primary takeaway here. This is what Rule 0 is for. Discussing with your group, especially if you want to do something unusual, like, yeah, I have this deck here that's all commons, but it technically has like two game changers in it, but it's all commons. Are you okay if, based on that, we consider this like a, a bracket 2 deck? Because I'm not playing, because apart from the couple of game changers, most of the cards in this deck are not actually powerful. They're not even uncommon. I don't get to play Wrath of God. I don't get to play Strip Mine. I don't get to play this, that, whatever else. And some people will say, okay, go ahead. Because one could argue that's a bracket 1 deck with some upgrades. So, anyway. Why I bring this up. This is a triggered ability. If this would take a bunch of damage from something, you can shunt it off to a card like Emrakul the Aeon's Torn. Oh. You can almost hit something that's got hexproof. Oh, all damage that would be dealt to it this turn, including damage that happens later on in the turn. This is a proactive shield. Oh, wow. This has got so many things going on with it. This is a card you guys got to pay more attention to. This has got a bunch of stuff. Like, this card says it has 3 modes. I did some mental analysis, and actually, let's go with the original version of this instead. Let's go with Funeral Charm. Exact same card, just in black instead of in blue. This has got 3 modes. I realized this has got 5 ways to use it. Mode 1. Target player discards a card. It says target player, so that can be you or one of your opponents. Typically, one of your opponents, often this is going to be, on their draw step after they've drawn their card for a turn. But it can be other times, and so on and so forth. Funeral Charm. Discard a card, no big deal. Target creature gets +2/-1 till end of turn. +2 power means hitting through for an extra couple of points of damage. -1 toughness means it can kill off small stuff. So there's 2 modes. Sorry, there's 2 uses hidden in that mode there. Last one. Target creature gains Swamp Walk till end of turn. The second way of using this is going to be a little more difficult. A little more difficult to actually find a time for it to actually come up, but it can come up. I'm going to assume a card like Urborg Tome of Yawgmoth, turning everything into swamps, because even in formats like Modern, it sees enough play to mention it. A creature that's got Swamp Walk cannot be blocked if its controller controls at least one land with a swamp type. Urborg turns all lands into swamps in addition to their other types. Ergo, if you have Urborg out, like Urborg Tome of Valmoth, ergo, if you have Urborg out, yeah, it's unblockable. You can't block this. The primary way people are going to do this is it's a little similar to the second mode, the +2 pair, getting through for extra damage. I'm attacking with a 5/5. Before blockers are declared, I give it Swamp Walk till end of their turn. You have a swamp in play. You cannot block this. Get through for 5 damage, and that could be lethal. This makes it more unblockable than something, in a context like that, more unblockable than something like Trample. It approaches this creature can't be blocked. It can't be blocked as long as they've got a swamp. Here's the other way to use it. If your opponent is attacking in such a way that you are forced to block, but not because of things like your life total, but because other effects, like lure, for example, say this creature must be blocked, or this creature, especially all creatures that can block this creature this turn that must do so. You're playing black. You probably have a swamp in play. You go, I'll give your creature Swamp Walk till end of turn. I now cannot block this creature. Sure, I take 5 damage, but all my creatures live. And you've probably wasted whatever effect. Because a lot of people that play with effects like that are playing with one-shots. And so suddenly their creature isn't going to be killing any of your stuff. Your creatures stick around and you get to get them potentially on the swing back. So this is why I say it doesn't look like it, but this one mode here has got 2 different ways you can use it. One offensive and one defensive. The last option is going to be harder to pull off. But you generally have 3 modes, 4 different ways that can be used, but one of those ways can be split into 2 different manners. And Piracy Charm, exact same card, it's in blue instead. Deals with islands. Anyway, yeah, so when I'm talking about, cards that can do many things, Corona Zealot feels like one of those cards that it looks simpler than it looks relatively simple. And it's not that difficult a card to deal with, but it does a lot more than it looks. Even Liberator. The flip side in terms of in terms of morphing versus cost to the Zealot, this is 2 white plus 2 to cast, 1 white plus 3 to turn face up. So it's a 2/3 flyer. When it's turn face up, target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice till end of turn. If you're playing birds, I would at least be looking at this, because this allows you to save your general from things like Star of Extinction and whatnot. You may not have to run an effect like a Chroma's Memorial. If you're not running an effect like a Chroma's Memorial. Even Liberator can save your bacon. Chroma's Memorial and Eldrazi Monument. I might go Monument first, but at least like keep this in your back pocket as an option. Giving color protection of your choice to land a turn is really strong. Especially if you somehow have a way to turn it face down again. Then things start getting a bit silly. Age of the Sentinels. We've talked in the past about, the attacking walls deck. This is a 4-mana 4/4 flying wall. And because it's a wall back in the day, basically got told it had Defender. When this blocks, it becomes a bird giant, or back in, the original wording said giant bird. And it loses Defender. The reason it says it loses Defender is because, again, walls. The wall creature type had inherent rules baggage attached to it, where it said in the rules that creatures that had the wall type couldn't attack. That was in the rules, and it was attached to the creature type. This is why the wording on, the Oracle text says it loses Defender, is because soon after the set came out, within a couple of years, they separated those two. And so now all walls have Defender. So all creatures that have Defender don't necessarily have, aren't necessarily walls. They may be walls and, with a lowercase, but not the wall creature type. But giving them Defender gave them the ability to actually produce more cards that had Defender without having to make them walls in the first place. Pardon me. Anyway, so when this card was printed, simply changing its type away from wall meant it lost Defender because the inability to block was part of the rules associated with being a wall. Since they separated those two, not a problem anymore. But now they actually have to put in line saying, and it loses Defender, because how it works, the job of the Oracle text is to look at a card, look at the time frame when it was printed, and emulate it as closely as possible with modern text. Because Defender was part of the rules, they have that additional piece of text to keep that. Because also keep in mind, like the way it's worded, just look at this top section: creature, wall, and then as reminder text, wall can't attack. As reminder text. That tells you that this walls can't attack is part of the rules. Because why would they put it in reminder text otherwise? Now we have a wall with Defender, and instead of saying walls can't attack, it says this creature can't attack. So yeah, they're making it work the way it used to work. And now you end up with a 4/4 bird giant. And I think they went with bird giant in the Oracle text as opposed to giant bird, because giant bird sounds like it could be one giant bird, like one bird that's like the size of a house or whatever, or the size of a mountain. Look up Rocket Care Ridges. ROC, not ROCK. Rock. Anyway, so once it blocks, it's a 4/4 flyer that can attack. So, I might. So, do I consider this for an attacking wall deck? It's a wall that eventually gets the ability to attack. However, when it gets the ability to attack, it's no longer a wall. Interesting. I'll leave that up for the comments. I'll let you guys hash that one out. Rain of Blades. Rain of Blades is not actually bad. 1 white, instant, 1 damage to each attacking creature. Plain, simple, easy. Cool. You're attacking with a bunch of stuff. Ping them all. Okay, now that they've all taken damage, now I'm going to choose blockers. Wait, what? It's even more fun when, they're attacking you and you've got first strike. Oh, that reminds me. Whenever it says attacking creature, a creature is attacking. A creature is considered attacking a lot longer than most people realize. Combat breaks down into 5 steps. Beginning of combat. At the beginning of combat, choose a creature you control. It gains haste till end of turn or whatever. Declare attackers. After which people can do, stuff like play instants. But it's still part of the declare attackers phase. First, you choose what you're attacking with, who you're attacking, and pay all relevant costs. And if it's illegal, you control Z and try again until you actually get one that you can do. Declare blockers. Same as declare attackers, but for people that are blocking instead. Combat damage. Damage is assigned. And then once it's all been assigned, then it resolves. End of combat. There are some effects that say at the end of combat. I believe this is when your zombie tokens that have decayed blow themselves up. But an attacking creature is considered an attacking creature until it's cleaned up during the end of combat. The end of combat step. So, somebody can do something really silly, wait for combat damage to be dealt with, and look at, okay. So, okay. Sorry, I was only half paying attention there. So that, and that all live with, like, 1 left? Like, they survive by a point each? Have I got that right? Yeah. Rain of Blades? They're all dead now. What? Yeah, they're all dead now. But this is still technically during the combat during the combat phase. There's still, yeah. You can be that guy. It's terrible, but you can do that. Dragon Stalker. Again, would not complain about somebody playing this. You're playing a bird deck? Play it. You're playing a soldier deck? Consider playing it. 5 mana for 3/3 with flying and protection from dragons. Not only are dragons dragons, but surprise, surprise, dragons is a creature type. Anything that's got all creature types, dot, dot, dot. Yeah, a pretty decent card, honestly, all things considered. It's this mean, and because protection specifically does four things. Can't be damaged by anything with the appropriate source. Can't be enchanted or equipped by anything of the relevant type. Much more difficult to pull off when you're, dealing with dragons. But, protection from green, for example, means you can't throw any green enchantments on it. It can't have green equipment attached to it, etc. Can't be blocked by anything of the relevant type. So this is, if your opponent's playing a dragon deck, this is going to get through for damage every turn. Give it vigilance, and it can block them as well. And can't be targeted by anything with the appropriate type. So if somebody's got a dragon that's like, tap this, deal damage to target creature equal to the number of dragons you control, or some effect of that nature, you go, yeah, you can't target my dragon stalker. Why? It's got protection from dragons. You cannot target it. Deal with it. Yeah. Yeah. Have fun playing. Like, especially if you're playing on a budget, this is like, you. I have commonly seen stores go minimum price for commons is a quarter and uncommons is 50 cents and rares is $1. I could see this being a 50-cent card. Depending on where you are, you might be able to get this for a quarter. Worth it. Dawn Elemental. Have this written down in my cube. Still haven't finished physically building the cube. It's taken a long time. But one of the things I wanted to do was give people a payoff for playing monocolored. And my payoff, if you did end up going mono white or heavy white, was Dawn Elemental. Quad white for a 3/3 flyer. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to Dawn Elemental. You need an effect like Path to Exile or Doomblade or whatever to get rid of it. Because if you try doing it with combat, if you try using the fight mechanic, if you try Lightning Bolt or whatever, it just turns around and goes, that's nice. I'm not taking any of it. Technically, you can still target it. It just doesn't do anything. It literally just sits there and goes, shrug. Got any more? Yeah. If you have any sort of legitimate reason for playing it, play it. And Daru Spiritualist. Daru Spiritualist is kind of funny. This feels like a combo piece. I don't have a specific combo in mind, but this feels like a combo piece. Whenever a cleric you control becomes the target of a spell or ability, it gets +0/+2 till end of turn. This is a cleric, so it also means whenever this becomes the target of a spell or ability. So if you've got a way to infinitely target the Spiritualist, this is going to get +0/+2 till end of turn. You target it, say, 50 times. it's going to be, barring other effects, 1 power and 100 toughness. You then use some kind of effect to like swap its power and toughness. Um, Usually red and blue do that. Black has got some ability to do it. I'm not aware of anything off the top of my head in white or green that can do it, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. And then some kind of fling style effect. Again, red is the... So you probably want to be running at least Boros for something like this. But you just end up with this giant, this creature with a giant butt. Here's the funny thing. As long as you can continually target it multiple times a turn. Like, consider throwing this in a Toughness Matters deck. Like Dorian the Siege Terror. Oh, you're blocking with like a 7/8? Okay. Oh, ping, 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 ping. Target, 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 target. Cool. This is now I've targeted it 4 times, so that's 8 plus 1 is 9. Oh, but I deal combat damage now based on toughness instead. So this is now essentially going to be dealing 9 power back to your creature. Sorry, you were saying. Yeah. Daru Spiritualist, it's got a couple places that can go. It's good, it has options. Let's look at blue. Mercurial Kite. This feels a little bit like it wants to not have flying. This is one of those weird cards where flying can actually be a bit of a drawback. But it's 4 mana for a 2/2 flyer, and realistically, at this point in the game's history, you're looking at 1 blue plus 2 for a 2/2 flyer. And if you want something with like a competent ability, you're commonly paying 4 mana for a 2/2 flyer with a competent ability. Whenever Mercurial Kite deals combat damage to a creature, tap that creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step, as in the other creature. So basically, you stun it for a turn. It doesn't get stun counters, but the effect is you stun it for a turn. Because it has flying, you either, you attack, and any flying or reach creatures they have that block this, that take damage from this, won't untap next turn, but they're being defensive, so you'd also need another way to tap them. Or they're attacking, you block with this, and then it can also be a ground creature at that point. You block, you kill, whatever. The kite will probably die because it's only a 2/2. And if people are attacking into the fact that you've got a 2/2 flyer, their creatures are probably, the same size or bigger. So this probably dies. But if it's dealing combat damage back, their creature doesn't untap next turn, which could be relevant. You probably want to block their largest, ideally non-trampling creature. But if you can absorb the extra life loss, then blocking a big trampler and not having to worry about taking anything from it the following turn might be worthwhile. Raven Guild Initiate. Considered throwing this in. Also, anytime I look at this card, it's like, it's cool, But that outfit is just weird. It's kind of like armor that's got holes in it. I am very confused by it. Like, like I'm looking here. There's like there are sections where it's like, how do you stay together? You're not going to stay together. Like this is begging to just rip apart here. That's going to fall apart. There's just going to be so many sections where it's like it's going to come apart. Anyway, um it's a 3 mana 1/4 with a morph cost of returning a bird you control to owner's hand. I considered throwing this in my I considered throwing this in my Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Because it's it's a creature that's got morph, and so stuff that can enter the battlefield in face down position. Face down, in my case, face down attack position most of the time. Um, yeah, but unfortunately, I didn't figure I'd be running enough birds to make it worthwhile. But then you get a 2/2 that can suddenly turn into a 1/4. But in the era when this was printed, combat damage, again, combat damage used to go on the stack. And so combat damage would be like assigned, the damage would go on the stack, and then you could respond to it, and then the damage would resolve. And it's in that little instance after it went on the stack and before it resolved that you turn this face up and you basically are handling combat that, that instance of combat instead of as a 2/2 or a 1/4. For a brief moment, it's basically handled as a 2/4. But, yeah. I don't think I'd bother in most decks. That being said, you're playing blue, you're going to be playing with funny shenanigans. You might have stuff like, xenographs, naming bird or whatever for whatever. Or you name, or you've got Masquerade Nexus or something of that nature, and so maybe you've got enough of that, or enough changelings, or enough just random. The kind of deck that you're building happens to have enough birds that it's worthwhile. Or making them actually. Doesn't Murmuring Mystic. Murmuring Mystic makes birds. Bird illusions, but it makes birds. That is interesting. But this comes down. The Murmuring Mystic costs more and would have to come down before the initiate. Less likely. Not unlikely. This is Commander after all. It can happen. But less likely. I don't think I'd bother. Ah. Thundercloud Elemental. So, 7 mana for a 3/4 flyer. So, back in the day, let's start off with Air Elemental, which was 2 blue plus 3 for a 4/4 flyer. So 2 blue plus 3. So you're paying an extra, we'll say 2.5, like just barely over 2 mana. Because you're losing a point of power, but just barely over 2 mana. But, blue plus 3, tap all creatures with toughness 2 or less. Blue plus 3, all other creatures lose flying till end of turn. Do you know how much havoc that can wreak on certain decks? Like this feels like this should actually be good somewhere. You're paying 2 extra mana over Air Elemental, which, to be fair, is not considered a great card. But you're losing 2 mana over Air Elemental. Let's say... Nah, okay. Go away. Bans you. So, you're paying 2 extra mana. I mean, my 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 problem is that the well, no. I was going to say my problem is the activate abilities cost so much. But this is not like dealing with crowd favorites, which had some um which was 7 mana for 4/4, 4 to tap a creature, or 4 to give a +0/+5 till end of turn. Which was kind of a lot. Um, 9, but you spent 11, 9, 13, 15. Wow. You'd have to activate this like 4 times and be playing with Toughness Matters for this to break even between between its toughness and the amount of mana you spent on it. Anyway, um but yeah, this is a 7 mana 4/4 with 2 4 mana abilities that were okay. 4 mana to tap target creatures, kind of a lot. But, if the creature is reasonably costed, like 5 mana I could see, then, 4 for tap target creature, I'm okay with that, and 4 to give a plus or plus. No, they made it 7 to cost. No, just bad. Whereas this is 7 to cost for a 3/4 flyer, which, again, you're spending an extra 2 and a bit. And its abilities are 1 colored plus 3 other, just like crowd favorites. And it's also an uncommon. 4/4 versus 3/4 flying is roughly a wash between, white and blue. But the abilities here are so much better. Especially the second one. All other creatures lose flying till end of turn. The ability to just screw up combat completely by going, hey, by the way, I've got this in play. I'm paying 4 mana. By the way, none of your creatures are flying now. What? Yeah, none of your creatures have flying now. Or, contrary, you can actually, try and help somebody. No, Raking Canopy? Is that the right one? Yeah, Raking Canopy. Whenever a creature with flying attacks you, this enchantment deals 4 damage to it. Well... Oh, you're attacking me with a bunch of flyers. And there's... Hold on. Before you declare attacks, gonna make your creatures lose flying till on the turn. Why? So Raking Canopy doesn't kill them all? Oh, okay, sure. This last ability is just, or, and the funny thing is, it's all other creatures, which means the Thundercloud Elemental stays, keeps flying. This can attack and it's going to be really hard to block. Much prefer this over the crowd favorites. 100% would play this in a heartbeat over crowd favorites. Slightly harder to cast? At 7 mana, I don't care. 2 blue plus 5 versus 1 blue plus 6 at 7 mana. If I don't have my second colored source by then. If I'm playing 5 color, maybe it's a problem. I'm playing like 3 or less, I'm probably fine. Yeah, Thundercloud Elemental. If it's something that interests you, like that last ability is just amazing. And the tap all creatures toughness 2 or 6, 2 or less. It's gonna be a bit harder to make work well, but I mean, if your opponent, if nobody's table has got any sort of, well, toughness 2 or less, so anything that gives +1/+1, if they're natively 1/1s, is still toughness of 2. So you have to have a couple of those kind of facts. And if they don't, or if they don't have something that gives... Nice Squirrel Army. Taps them all. What? Taps them all. During the beginning of combat, I tap down your Squirrel Army. Scornful Egotist. Scornful Egotist had a reason for its existence. I'm not saying it's good, but it actually had a legitimate reason for its existence. This block, and it might have been this set in specific, I don't remember, but this block had a handful of cards that took a look at the mana value of, it basically looked and said, what's the highest mana value you've got in play? And so Scornful Egotist, it's an 8 mana 1/1 with Morph for blue. Its job was to be likely the most expensive creature, the most expensive permanent you had in play, and the most expensive creature you had in play by mana value. You never cast it for 8. You gotta play face down. You turn it face up for blue in response to something else you were casting. I believe that's the Scourge. Okay. Rush of Knowledge. From this set, also common. Draw cards equal to the greatest mana value among permanents you control. It's a 5-drop, so at 6 mana, you cast this, and in response to casting this, you turn the Egotist face up, and then when this resolves, it'll see an 8 mana card. You go, cool, I spent 5 to cast Rush of Knowledge, +1 to turn the Egotist face up. I'm going to draw 8 cards for my 5 mana investment. That was the job of Scornful Egotist. To be a card that you could play cheap and had a high mana value to draw a lot of cards, or other effects that cared about similar effects. Cabal Conditioning did some kind of discard effect. And there were other cards that a number of players each discard a number of cards equal to the number of greatest mana value among permanents you control. So you turn it face up, and suddenly everyone's having to discard 8 cards, which probably means their entire hand. Accelerate Mutation is basically 5 mana for a giant growth effect based on the highest mana value. Dispersal Shield. Counter target spell if it doesn't cost more than your highest mana value. Reward the Faithful. 1 mana. A number of target players gain life equal to the highest mana value. And Torrent of Fire deals damage to any target equal to your highest mana value. The number of times I've only like half read this card and went, meh, not worth it. It actually does a lot more than it looks like at first glance. The problem is, like, 5 mana sorcery, realistically, in a lot of cases, you're probably doing like 4, 5, or 6 damage. So we'll say 5 damage to any target, which isn't bad. It's like Lava Axe, but to any target. But it's 5 damage for 5 mana. Is that enough? You know? This feels like it wants to be in a deck with a bunch of cards that cost more for some reason. And notice that none of them care about the color of the card, just the mana value. So Affinity, for example, has got a lot of 7 drops in it. You know, or if you look at, even if you look at my mono brown ramp deck, cut you, you're there for ramp, you're there for ramp, assembly workers, removal, nothing there's gonna matter, recursion. Wow, where are you guys? Stuff to ramp into, 11. The cheapest in this section is 6, and I've got like 6, 7, 8, 9, 6, 6, 8, 8, 6, 6, 8. So I've got a bunch of 6s, almost as many 8s, and a 7 and a 9. So in a deck like that, Torrent of Fire is regularly going to do, is more often than not, well, there's 11 cards, so 1 and 9 is going to be something that's there specifically to ramp into. Which means by the time you cast Torrent of Fire, you probably have at least 1 in play. Which means Torrent of Fire, by the time you cast it, is probably going to deal at least 6 damage. I would say on average, because 7, you group the 7 with it, yeah, probably I would say at least 7 damage, which is not unreasonable. I think that's a fair assumption. In a deck like that, I might put Torrent of Fire in. My problem is that I look at that and I see, like, I look at that these days and I see it's a 5 mana sorcery that's going to hit a creature for a bunch of damage. So if I'm doing that, I might as well play Aftershock, Lava Flow, Fissure, Introduction to Annihilation, or something similar. Or or there's, you know, if I'm going to non-commons, there's, I think it's Cindercloud. Is that the one I'm thinking of? There's another one that starts off with destroy target creature. That's in mono red. That's also 5 mana. That can burninate the opponent, like burninate the controller. So it's the same cost, and it's also sorcery. If I want Torrent of Fire, I want it over something like that because it does say, I mean, it said back then target creature or player. Nowadays it says to any target, which again also means planeswalkers and battles because they didn't exist yet. But at that point you're going, cool. Let's take your Tibalt down down a few pegs. Or maybe you're playing it in a deck that's got Tibalt, which is like 7 or 8 mana, etc., etc. So, but again, that was the purpose for Scornful Egotist. Don't run it nowadays. Between cards that have got Escape, cards that have got Delve, or your giant beasties in blue that care about how many instants or sorceries are in your graveyard. Some of them that say graveyard or exiled, and other stuff like that you can cast for cheap. Never mind, your cards have got affinity for whatever or what have you. Back then, there were not easy ways to get a high mana value card for cheap, especially in blue. Nowadays, you have options. Play them over the Egotist. Even at common. The number one reason to run Egotist is for the memes. And if you're doing it for the memes, go ahead. Don't be surprised if somebody looks at you and goes, aha! But if you're doing it for the memes, you don't care. That's the entire reason for doing it. Frozen Solid. I have this in at least one, if not two, of my commons only decks. Kind of as a removal spell. It keeps a It keeps a creature that's tapped down. As something deals damage to it, it gets blowed up. Because it's kind of like, it's, well, if you look at the image, for example, it's stuck in a block of ice. But if you end up hitting through to the creature itself, as opposed to the ice, it's frozen solid. It shatters. Nice flavor went on there. But yeah. Blue does not get a plethora of ways to remove creatures. This can help kill a creature. This plus like Viridian Longbow on like one of your creatures, it's like, cool, it's dead now. Metamorphose. Metamorphose is weird. Metamorphose is one of those weird cards in the line of like polymorph effects. Keep in mind that Artifact, creature, enchantment, land. What am I missing? No, that was it, wasn't it? Instant and sorcery. Everything else came out after it. Yeah. I don't know why they bothered enumerating it. But like 2 mana instant, put target permanent an opponent controls on top of their library. This is great because this is one way to remove an attacker and delay it for a turn. That opponent may put an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land from their hand onto the battlefield. Basically, they could have just said permanent again. I don't think there were any other permanent types that existed yet. Because I think once Planeswalker came out, we had 7 types. And Tribal made it 8. I think that's Kindred now. That feels right. Because you had these 4 plus instant and sorcery makes 6. Which are not permanent types. But they are card types. Yeah. They could have just said permanent. May put a permanent card from his or her hand into play. I don't know why they didn't just say that. Because this would be like a decade before they even tried Planeswalkers. Don't know. But that being said, this is a polymorph effect that, you take a chance on what your opponent's got in hand. That being said, if you've had the ability to keep an eye on what your opponent's been drawing somehow, you can make use of that. Or if your opponent's empty-handed, it's like... But yeah, this has got a few things going on for it. Like I said, you're attacking with like 5 big creatures. Okay, take your biggest one, put on back on top of your deck. You can drop something else in play, but it's not attacking because attackers have already been declared. So even if it's got haste, you're SOL. Yeah. So, yeah. You can play this as... This is a tough one. I would rather play Frozen Solid and Thunderscape Elemental realistically over Metamorphose. I can see uses for Metamorphose, but you have to be careful with that. Although that being said, throwing it on an Icecrown Scepter is hilarious. Whoops, wrong one. So, yeah. I would consider it temporary protection. That being said, next card, Coastal Watcher. If you're playing birds, you might want to look into this. Why? It has a phrase that you do not see very often that's going to be useful when you're playing Commander. It's a 2 mana, 1/1 flyer, bird soldier. It has flying and protection from green. Green is a very, very commonly played color on its own and in other and with other combinations. I would say that protection from green. You're playing blue. You you're playing birds. You should be playing this. Pardon me. You're playing birds. You should be playing this. You're playing a lot of things. Like at least have this. You know, at least be aware that this thing exists. You know, and if you dare follow my footsteps at all and start building decks that do stuff outside what their color is known for, you should be you hit blue, you should be running this. Coastal Watcher, a blue a blue flyer with protection from green, yeah, you should be running this. Cuz blue does protection from X hardly shows up ever, and it's almost always on white. Sometimes on uh sometimes on black, usually to counteract the white version, because white usually has, protection from black, and then the black version's got protection from white. Um, Rarely, um, green and red get involved in that as well. And the ultra rare, sorry, the foil, the playable foil mythic version is blue getting protection from a color. It does not happen very much at all. And green being as popular as it is in Commander, yeah, play this. Hindering touch. Hindering touch is going to be hindering touch. Let's start at the beginning. One blue, three other. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. Storm. For those that are not aware, Storm basically says when you cast a spell, copy it for each other spell that was cast this turn. You do not have to have cast them. They just have to have been cast. So, if I cast a draw spell and somebody goes, well, I'll counterspell it, and somebody else goes, ha, Tybalt's Trickery or your counterspell. Well, that's 3 spells have been cast, and if another player then turns around and goes, cool, I'll hinder and touch your draw spell. 1 base, and 3 other spells have already been cast that turn. There's going to be 4 copies of this on the stack. So you're going to see 4 copies of counter target spell unless its controller pays 2 on the stack. Which means if I want my draw spell to resolve, assuming everything else happens, and then assuming all the copies were pointed at my draw spell, yeah, I'm going to have to pay an extra 8 mana if I want to draw those cards. I probably don't have the extra 8 mana. I might have 4. Which means they can probably turn around and go, oh, by the way, I'm going to spend 2 of it against your counterspell and 2 of it on your Tybalt's Trickery just because it's funny. Yeah. Yeah. So, Storm, copy it for each spell cast before it. Does not matter who cast them. If you're playing with counter spells and you want to be able to like, a mana leak variant, if you expect at least one other person to be running counter spells of some sort in your group, consider Hindering Touch. Raven Guild Master. Are you playing Milson? This is one of those cards that you want to make sure gets unblockable. 2 blue plus 1. Morph for an extra. You're probably just going... Well, no. If you're running enough morphs, you may cast this as a you may do this as a morph. If you've only got a handful, I would just probably cast it straight up. Because especially once people have played you once or twice, they'll be like, yeah, I know what card that is. But if you're playing with, like, you know, a dozen morphs, what do you think this one is? Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top 10 cards of their library. As in, barring some very unusual shenanigans, they're not getting them back. But you're not getting them back. Your top 10 cards, gone. Goodbye. Yeah. You hit somebody... I would say if you hit somebody 6... I would say if you hit somebody 6 times, they're probably about dead with this. Eight for sure. So if you give it double strike, 4 attacks, your opponent's your opponent's pretty much dead by that point. And if you're playing this in if you play this in 60 card formats, you give this double strike. Depending on the kind of deck they're playing, you might be able to actually hit them only twice. And even without double strike, I would probably say 5 attacks. This kind of attacks as a 4-power creature if you look at it from that direction. Yeah, kind of silly. Shoreline Ranger. Again, 3/4 flyer for with Island Cycling 2. 3/4 flyer for 6. This always felt a bit expensive to me. Not a lot, but a bit. Again, start off with Air Elemental, 2 blue plus 3. So if we went 1 blue plus 4, you could probably get away with a 3/4 flyer. So an extra mana gave you Island Cycling. However, this has actually historically seen play in Vintage. I can't remember about Legacy, but definitely Vintage. Because it had 3 things going on for it. I mean, we are talking, more than 20 years ago. Well, we're talking about 20, well, maybe more than 15 years ago, anyway. So, 6 mana. Yeah, it sounds like a lot. You are talking a format where you get to play with Mox and Black Lotus and all of that jazz. So, this was something that you could reasonably cast in a reasonable amount. Faster than it first appears. Also, the only other format where you can legally play Sol Ring. You had a 6 mana, 3/4 flyer which was, I mean, it's a decent size. It's going to beat fairly decently. Number 2, it had island cycling, so you didn't have to use a fetch land to grab your underground sea or whatever. You could use this. You know, if you needed your watery grave, not your watery grave, if you needed your underground, wow, if you need your polluted delta to fetch Bayou, let's say, you could use this to fetch your underground sea. So it wasn't a great use of it, but it was a use of it. And then it did have the third option, which people like to, sometimes like to joke about. It was it was a consideration that put it a little further up than it would have been otherwise. Oh, must be good. It's blue. It pitches the force of will. A lot of tongue in cheek there, quite often. Again, made it slightly better than it would have been otherwise. And there's just enough to it that people are like, okay, yeah, we will actually try this card and see what it's actually like. It didn't see a lot. It didn't see a lot of play, but it was fine. But you can get your island cycling for one. Like you can get basic land cycling at 1 mana now. You've also got a bunch of other cards that have got island cycling these days to work with. But this was the first time we actually had land cycling. First time. What are you going to do? So again, it was a little on the expensive side even back then, but you also didn't know how broken or weak it could end up being. So it's still fine. Again, I wouldn't fault anyone for playing it. I wouldn't go out of my way to play it these days, but I wouldn't fault anyone for it.